Hey, have you ever noticed that more and more land in the US is becoming the suburbs? Between 2000 and 2010, US urban area expanded by 15%. By 2060, the percentage of US land area for urban use is expected to double from 3 to 6%. But instead of talking about why that's bad for towns and why exactly it's happening, I want to look at where that land is coming from. Our cities are eating our farms, and nobody is really talking about it. So let's talk about farming policy. Okay, I know that it sounds boring. However, farming policy is the most important undiscussed factor in preventing the suburbanization of America and the world. So please join me as I explain why. Farmland makes up about 38% of the world's dry surface, 40% in the United States, and 51% in Germany, for example. This is significantly more than the current 3% of land for urban area. It is difficult to find definite statistics, however, approximately 75% of all land zoned for residential in major American cities is zoned for single-family housing. In California, single-family zoning is as much as 50% to two-thirds of all the developable land in the entire state. Some of this housing has been built upon lots once occupied by dense, mixed-use blocks. However, that is not the entire story. With cities historically showing a carelessness with the finite nature of land and space, the non-farming land close to cities was quickly devoured for single-family use or strip malls, while downtowns were being flattened for parking or highways. So what does this have to do with farms? During the post-war boom, developers looked for large and relatively cheap plots of land to feast on next. Levittown, New York, the first uniform suburban development, was built on a 7-acre potato and onion farm on Long Island. Even New Jersey, one of the most suburban states in the country, used to be incredibly rural. But don't take my word for it. Who do I know in New Jersey?
So part of the reason we're going to Chalfont is you can see that you can easily get to some farms that are right here that are close to the station. So we're going to check those out. There used to be farms there. Oh.
Chalfont used to be a farm town. It used to be rural, but over time the suburbs have slowly sprawled out from the city core.
When farms near a city inevitably close, go bankrupt, or merge due to changes in farming and the economy, former farmland is often converted to low-density residential. After all, there is no such thing as new land. There is only land which changes its use. But is there any way to stop developers from eating land to make new housing? Is there any way to protect our farms and our cities? Farms in the US account for 0.6% of the US GDP. Consider how much of the US is farmland, and you'll realize that farming is a difficult business to make money in. A farmer can do everything right and still lose hundreds of thousands of dollars due to external factors at no fault of their own.
Farming 7 days a week for a year on a 1,000-acre farm has generated an income of £144. And the next time a farmer moans about the weather, put your arm around him and buy him a pint, because he's not moaning about it because it's a bit miserable working in the rain. He's moaning about it because it's crucifying.
And it's not just the weather that farmers need to be worried about.
If a farmer is unfortunate enough to be located near a growing metro area, rising land values may increase taxes to the point where they are simply unable to make a profit on that land and are forced to sell to keep up with those taxes. But what is unique about farming is that when a business goes bust, it isn't always just the business that suffers. While corporate farming has become more popular, many farms are still owner-operator. So when I tell you the statistic that the number of farms in the US decreased approximately 7% between 2000 and 2021, that number obscures the up to 154,730 families that lost their livelihoods, their homes, their land, and more. After all, it is owner-operator farms that struggle the most,
As evidenced by this clip from Clarkson's farm.
What are farmers going to do? I mean, honestly, what are they going to do? The ones who don't have Amazon film crews farming around it.
There'll be 30% less farmers, probably.
Desperate farmers are left no choice but to sell the land that may have been in their family for hundreds of years to satisfy their creditors, or just to stay afloat. Sometimes that land will be purchased by other farmers, but oftentimes it ends up being picked up by developers, corporate farms, or industry. Between 1997 and 2017, 5.8% of the land once held for farming in the US was converted to non-farming uses. So why does this matter at all? Wouldn't their land better be used serving the economy? Well, this is where a capitalist approach fails us. As food supply chains get further and further from where things are sold, i.e. cities or towns, the supply chains emit more carbon and become more complicated. We saw during the pandemic how these supply chains broke down, where the empty shelves were caused by breakdowns in the supply chain, not in the amount of food available. So wouldn't it be better to have a world where food was close, where we ate the food made on our farms, not the farms themselves? I grew up in a small town next to a farm which sold much of its own produce and also goods from nearby local farms. It was easy to go 5 minutes and arrive at fresh, locally produced farm products. That said, the neighborhood I lived in was itself a livestock farm for hundreds of years, now only survived by the original farmhouse. I've heard people talk about or idealize the rural lifestyle and fashion themselves living it. They buy a house in the countryside or on a development. But it's worth asking what was there before that house, and if you buying it came at the cost of a farmer's livelihood. If you living somewhere rural comes at the cost of that rural place no longer being rural. So what can we do about this? Well, other than requiring a minimum number of cows per lot of land, there are a few strategies which we can try to prevent the suburbanization of farmland. The first idea, and I know that this sounds counterintuitive, could be higher property taxes. Raising property taxes would allow for better utilization of downtown spaces by forcing landlords and developers to build more dense, plus profitable buildings on the same plots that would have been land banked, used for single-family housing, or were just vacant. Higher taxes is one possible solution to this. Of course, I believe that farmers should have an exception to these higher taxes. Another idea is that if a farmer goes out of business, another farmer could have the right to purchase his land over all other non-farming bidders. I stole this idea from Germany, which has used this policy to maintain 50% of the country as farmland. Although there would not always be an interested farmer, at least the developer would not win by default because they always have more money. Beyond this, we should make it easier for farmland which has reached the end of its practical usage to transition into other uses before becoming housing. For example, grants could allow fallow land to become grassland or forest. Land could then be transferred to the government, local or federal, for further protection. But most of these measures would not address the core of the issue, which is twofold. Farming has always been a difficult industry to make a living in, and there is still demand for single-family housing. I will leave it to more qualified people to figure out further ways to support our farmers. However, my 2 cents on the single-family housing issue is that if we raise the property tax, it may decrease the amount of single-family housing that needs to be built because more people would already have found housing in mixed-use neighborhoods, and because building single-family housing would no longer be profitable for most. As single-family housing continues to become less affordable due to this constrained supply, and if we continue the current trend of properly investing in our downtowns and densification, single-family demand may reach a natural limit in the near future. This does not mean that we shouldn't take active measures to push people to better types of housing, but at least there is hope, as some of this has already begun to happen. Every year in the US, developers continue to build vast acres of new single-family housing, but with this seemingly unlimited source of land from farms, we sometimes forget that even land is finite, and so are the people who farm it. We need to protect our farms because farmers matter, and sometimes they are the only thing standing between developers and a suburban hellscape. Thank you so much for watching. I'm honestly interested to read your ideas and to see what solutions you come up with below in the comments. Please check out my other videos, like and subscribe for more.